You're listening to Great Life, Great Career with Scott Miller, brought to you by FranklinCovey.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Fascinating conversation with the renowned expert Todd Davis. Although, Todd, you serve as FranklinCovey's Chief People Officer, which means you're supposed to be an expert on people. I see a future for you. When you retire at the age of 90 from FranklinCovey, I think you will be in hot demand to be an advisor and counselor to CEOs, CHROs around the world, right? How do you bring what will then be your 100 years of experience to the table to help people that are dealing with this most important asset and the most common challenge, right? How do you leverage the maturity and the wisdom of people? How do you take otherwise well-intended people like me that are kind of, walking along the potholes of their career and avoid stepping in them? Todd, I'd like to take the next 20 minutes or so and get really practical. Let's talk about the increasing likelihood that most organizations are moving less away from having people on one campus and 15 stories and hiring talent out wherever it is. Why do you think leaders are, to the extent they are, hesitant to do that? And how do we make sure that virtual employees, people who work from home, work from regional offices, feel connected and could actually describe the culture of their organization when they're working from their home in Tulsa and the headquarters is in Hoboken, New Jersey?
Yeah, great question, and a very real situation. I think your first question, the reason why certain leaders are hesitant, we talk a lot about paradigms at FranklinCovey, and I think more and more we get stuck in our old ways of doing things. I mean, this is how we've always done it. This is how it's worked. And so it's hard for us, even really smart people, it's hard for us to visualize doing something different than has been successful for the past 15, 20 years. But more and more, the talent doesn't come to us. We have to go to the talent. And the talent, to get the real talent, the top talent, we've got to break out of that paradigm and say, okay, well, this is the best woman on the planet to do this particular job, and she's not willing to relocate. And this other organization is willing to work out a deal with her that she can stay in her hometown or wherever she wants to be. We better start opening ourselves up to that flexibility as well. So it's really acknowledging our paradigms. I have to do it regularly, even though I teach it, think about it all the time. I have to step outside and say, wait a minute, how could I see this differently? And how can we accomplish what we want to accomplish? Maybe not through the same way that we've always done it before. So I think leaders, especially leaders who have been in their role for a long time, need to ask themselves, as we talk at FranklinCovey, what is the end in mind? What is the real result we want here? And why am I thinking there's only this one way to achieve it? So that's a way to kind of break the mind, the paradigm that we have, and go after the talent versus trying to get all the talent to come to us physically.
And Todd, the second part of that question, follow up on what advice would you give leaders who have a dispersed workforce, and they're trying
hopefully diverse and dispersed.
That's right. Yeah. How do you do that? I mean, when you have 30 employees and they're all at different states and you see them maybe once a year, what are some ways to make sure that you keep this cohesion and that they're engaged and that they choose not to take the recruiter's call because they're so loyal to you and the culture and the team?
You asked earlier about what are some of the things why we have lost some good people. It hasn't happened often, but it has happened. And one of the reasons is they're lonely. They feel lonely in the role they're in. And I've seen them join other companies where they're still working remotely. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, what have we been doing wrong that made them feel more lonely than, XYZ company they just joined? So I think the key here to your question, the first and foremost, is empathy. And what I mean by that is, as a leader or as a leadership team, put yourself in the place of that woman or that man who's working out of their home office every day, day in and day out. Yes, they might be going out to see clients and coming back, but those clients are, in some cases, temporary. They're not around a team that, like you and I, get to see every day. Put yourself in their place. Then there'll be many ideas that come to mind. It'll be constantly top of mind. Most important of all, you'll be talking to them about it. Hey, Joe, how's it going? Gosh, I can't imagine what it would be like. Just even making a comment to some remote worker. I can't imagine what it would be like to be 3 weeks out there since we've last connected, physically. I mean, hopefully we're talking twice a week. That acknowledgement goes a long way with people, just to feel a little bit understood. Thank heavens for Zoom calls.
Oh my gosh.
Right. I think, we used to joke about nobody uses voicemail anymore. Well, nobody uses conference calls anymore, at least in our organization.
Right.
If you set up an appointment with me, it better be on a Zoom, because I'm not that excited to just hear your voice. I want to see you. I want to interact with you. And it's kind of a little bit hard to describe, but the connection is so much more relevant when you can see the person that you're talking to.
I've had the exact same experience. FranklinCovey's head writer, Megan Thompson, who lives in Virginia, reports to me as the leader of our thought leadership. And this woman has incalculable talents. And we try to do all of our calls via Zoom. And I feel like we have a much better connection as a team when we have a call on Zoom versus on just radio or on the on radio on its own.
Calls, yeah.
Todd, does culture start at the top? Does it have to be in the C-suite? Can it start in the middle, at the bottom? I mean, if someone's looking to transform their culture, where do they start?
Right. Well, it's a great question. It spreads most effectively or most quickly if it starts at the top. But no, I get asked that question a lot. We have a CEO and she doesn't this or he doesn't that. And again, another model, but I've been around it for 23 years now. We talk about it at FranklinCovey is working within our circle of influence. And I have seen over and over again, not just in our organization, but other organizations we've worked with, where a small team, even an informal leader, starts focusing on her culture or his culture where they are. And that starts to spread because that team starts to get better and better results. And other people take notice and say, wait a minute, what are they doing? Well, they meet more frequently than you do. Or this leader has one-on-ones on a consistent basis, doesn't cancel them all the time like you've been doing, or things like that. And these other leaders who want those same results start to pick up on that kind of thing. So while starting at the top certainly spreads it quicker, it can start anywhere.
Our question today is the insanely wise author Get Better, Todd Davis, who also serves as the Chief People Officer of the FranklinCovey Company. How'd you get so wise? Reps?
I've had the benefit of working around some very wise people for a very long time.
Touche, same with me. Todd, let's talk about the emerging workforce. It's no secret that in the last couple of years, most of the baby boomers and traditionalists that are in the workforce are kind of coming into what Stephen Covey would have called the kind of crescendo of their career, kind of moving into retirement or moving into the twilight of their professional journey, and that millennials, Gen Xers, a whole younger generation of super smart, talented, demanding, contributing people are coming into the workforce. What do you see as the most palpable shift in terms of what the new generation wants out of their culture, as perhaps compared to people like you and I that are in our 50s and 60s that are still, robustly engaged, but we're, moving into our own
Twilight.
I was going to say grave, but no. Call that out. Talk pragmatically about that.
Well, as you talked a minute ago about me doing consulting in my later years, I pictured myself in the nursing homes around the world that I'd be
having Zoom calls with CEOs from Dubai.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, it is a great question, and I think there is and isn't a bit of a stereotype there. There is the thought by some that the more seasoned, older workforce, what they focused on was stability, making as much money as they could, and less about mission and the contribution to society or whatever. And then there's this, and then equally there's this stereotype of the younger workforce going in, and they care less about money and things. They're minimalists, and they care more about their contribution. And while that may be true, I think that's true across the board. I know I care deeply about what I do every day and how it contributes. And while yes, I and you and others want to earn a good living, it's equally as important as far as our contribution. And I know many millennials and Gen Xers and that care a lot about how much money they earn while trying to make a contribution to the world. So I think it's not dangerous, but it's important to acknowledge that, hey, we're all people, and you may meet some 70-year-old who wants to go and build water lines in some underdeveloped country all day long, and you might meet some millennial that is her goal is to be the CEO and earn as much money as she can, and that's fine. So let's acknowledge that, first of all, and not put people into these buckets. But let's also be aware that it's important as a leader and as a leadership to take time to get to know your people. I think that's probably the number one rule, is to sit down with each person that you're responsible for whom you're responsible, and say, what's important to you? Where do you see yourself, again, standard question, but where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? Or what are some of the options? How could I best serve you as a leader? You and I talked the other day, and we've put this in the book we're writing, a question about, do you want to be a great leader, or do you want your team to have a great leader? And people will ask us both, isn't that the same thing? No, a little bit of a nuance. But if I want to be a great leader, then I'm still a good person, but my primary focus is on how can I be known as a great leader versus do I want my team led by a great leader? Focus isn't on me, and whether I get credit for what they do or don't do isn't really important. It's just, what does Scott need? What does Drew need? What does Tricia need? And that's my focus every day.
I need to own a gelato cart in the Amalfi Coast of Italy. That's where I see myself in 10 years with my wife and my 3 sons scooping out chocolate gelato to unsuspecting Americans that have $8.
Sounds kind of fun to me.
3 times a day, right? Yeah. Todd, let's move to the role of leadership, because you have, in the 60 keynotes you've given the last year, you're one of the most in-demand keynote authorities at the FranklinCovey Company. You've talked a lot about the role that leadership plays in culture. I've even heard you say kind of leaders are the linchpin of cultures. Take just a moment and share, why are leaders so important to transforming, building, and sustaining culture?
Scott, you think about your parents when you were growing up in your family.
Oh, don't do this to me.
Yeah. PTSD here. But think about your parents, or for your listeners,
Sure.
whoever played that role, whether an aunt, an uncle, whoever your legal guardians were, let's say, they determined the culture of your upbringing, of your family, the tone there. It doesn't
even to this day.
Even to this day, some of us who struggle with that, yes. So it doesn't change when we go into the professional world. Our leaders are still the parents of the organization, and they set the tone for that culture. What the leader values gets valued. I try to, I don't always do a good job, but I try to remember every day in my leadership role what I value. And it's not just what I talk about valuing, it's what I'm modeling. It's what time I leave to go home. You know, if I stay till 8 or 9 at night because I've got a lot to do and I'm worried my team doesn't have balance and I'm telling them to have more balance, some of them have young children, but I'm thinking, wait a minute, Todd, what are you modeling for them? If I have skipped a couple of weeks on one-on-ones and yet I tell them how important they are to me, those are just words because I'm not showing that and showing with the time that I allot. So what the leader values gets valued. The leader sets the tone for the culture of the organization.
Todd, this is a broad question, but what do most people look for in a leader? As you listen to people who praise their leaders in private with you or in public, people come in and lament and complain. What are the 3 or 4 things that everybody wants in a leader?
Yeah. I think what everybody wants in a leader, top of the list, is empathy that I just talked about. I want my leader to understand me. She doesn't need to agree with me. He doesn't need to necessarily see things the way I see them. But once I know they understand me, I feel a real sense of accountability to that person. That's the first thing. I want them to be clear on the vision. Whether I agree with it or not, I want to know, and I want them to make sure I know where we're going and what my role is in it. So I think take time to understand your people. You know, I love a phrase that Stephen Covey used to use. He said, the key to empathy is suspending your opinion long enough to understand the opinion and the feelings of another. And I love that word suspend, because it's not get rid of your opinion. It's not, even put it aside, because that kind of implies that maybe I forget about it. But just suspend your opinion long enough for the 10 minutes, for the 2 hours you spend with me, so you can really hear me. I think if more leaders would do that, they would have the devotion, the dedication, and the true engagement of the teams that they lead.
Speaking of wise people, I think it was Abraham Lincoln that was quoted as saying, I don't like that person. I should spend more time with them, or I should get to know them better.
Yeah.
It kind of haunts me.
Such a great quote.
You brought up Dr. Stephen R. Covey. You were kind of an ingenue. I mean, he was like a coach to you and a leader and a friend, almost like a father figure in some ways to you. You knew him very well. What's the biggest lesson you learned from Stephen R. Covey? He passed about 6 years ago or so.
Yeah.
The author of the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, sold 30 million copies. What's the wisest legacy he left with you, someone who shadowed his side for 2 decades?
Yeah. What a great question. And boy, my mind is flooding with lessons that I and you and others that had the privilege of working directly with him learned. But I would say it's a combination of 2 things. Someone who truly walked their talk, and yet with this foundation of humility. He, by his own admission, in almost every keynote I ever heard him deliver, talked about how he was continually working on each of the 7 habits to try and become a better person. So here he was, this model, as close a model as anyone I had seen of the 7 habits, and yet freely admitted that he struggled daily with them and that it was an ongoing journey. You never arrived there, but it was the intent and it was the pursuit of getting there that made him so great and such an impressionable leader in my life.
We're talking today with Todd Davis, who is the Chief People Officer of the FranklinCovey Company, the employer of both myself and Todd, and the author of the phenomenal book, Get Better, 15 Proven Practices to Build Effective Relationships at Work. Todd, in our final couple of minutes, I want to talk about a new book that you're working on. I don't know how you do your job because you have 4 children and your wife, Trish, you've been married for 39 years. That's amazing. You're stable. You've been at the FranklinCovey Company for coming on 24 years. You've authored a Wall Street Journal best-selling book, and you are an author on a new book that FranklinCovey is publishing in October of this year called Everyone Deserves a Great Manager, the 6 Critical Practices for Leading a Team. Will you spend a couple of minutes and talk about why you chose to author that book? What's it about? Who's it aimed at? And why would someone be interested in picking that up?
Well, there's a lot of questions in there. Did I choose to author that book? I was flattered to be asked to be one of the co-authors on that book with you and our great partner, Victoria Roos-Olson. Everyone Deserves a Great Manager was initially and still is designed for first-time leaders, but with a caveat. I've been a leader for a long, long time, and I'll tell you, in writing this book and researching for this book, there have been many things that I thought, ooh, I got to do a better job of that, or boy, that was the challenge I had last month, or things like that. So it's really a book for any leader, but with specific target of those who have been such an excellent individual performer that we decided to promote them. And as we talk about in the book, this is a proven statistic or a research statistic that the majority of people are put in a leadership role, and it's not for at least 10 to 12 years later that they get any kind of formal leadership training. I had a great gentleman who's in a leadership role at FranklinCovey come to me about half a year ago and he's over a large group of folks, first-time leader, and he said, I need to have a discussion with so-and-so and her attendance and her punctuality. And I said, well, I would remind her of the policy, and I would remind her of this and this and this. And he said, I know, but what do I say? And I said, well, I would just set up an appointment with her and tell her that we have this. And he said, I know, but what do I say? And it took, and shame on me.
He wanted the words.
Here I've been talking about empathy. It took him 3 or 4 times to say, Todd, I don't know how to begin this conversation. Right. She was my colleague. I was a peer to her, and now I'm her leader. And I said, to this person, I'll call him Tom. I said, Tom, thank you. Shame on me. Absolutely, you would want to know this. I would call this person in. I'll call her Denise. And I would say, hey, Denise, I really appreciate you taking time to meet with me. And I could see him writing down every word. I appreciate the great work you do. And I need to have a difficult conversation with you. It's about your attendance and your punctuality. And again, taking note of every word. First-time leaders don't even know how to begin. Many don't know how to begin a difficult conversation, or they're worried they're going to do it wrong. So this book, that's just one example of the things this book addresses. And that's a very basic thing. A more high-level concept, or one of the practices, is to just develop a leader's mindset. You know, you've gone from being this phenomenal individual performer, getting results on your own and being responsible for those results on your own, to now saying, wait a minute, my results are actually my team's results. And who cares that I can run the marathon? I got to help all 20 of them run their marathon. And I've got to have that mindset every day. That's developing a leader's mindset. So those are a couple of examples of the book, Everyone Deserves a Great Manager.
You mentioned I'm a co-author of that book. I'm honored to join you because you're the best-selling author. And Simon & Schuster is publishing this book. The book actually is based, as you mentioned, on our new first-level leader offering called The 6 Critical Practices for Leading a Team. If anybody has interest in that, you are also welcome to join us for a whole variety of webcast and podcast on FranklinCovey.com. If you want more interest in knowledge on what are those 6 critical practices, book Todd for a keynote because he's the expert at that. So Todd, thank you for joining us today on Great Life, Great Career. No doubt this will be the second highest rated and downloaded podcast in our journey. We appreciate you joining us today, and back to FranklinCovey to help you build a great culture.
Thank you very much.